Okay, so I have an odd story. To me, it's pretty creepy, and I've thought about it over the years at random times in my life. I was a preteen. I've grown up and still live in a small town in Washington state, on the other side of the mountains from the coast. Our town is in a valley, very safe growing up. My mom had a long-time friend from high school, and she had a son my younger brother's age and a daughter a year older than me. So we spent a lot of time together. I was pretty quiet, an introverted kid due to the environment I lived in, which is not relative to the story, but the reason I've never spoken about what happened until now, the girl's name was Heather. She was very outgoing, very much a bully. Looking back now, I realize it was her way of survival with the kind of mother she had. Her mother scared the crap out of me. Anyways, I would hang out with Heather, even though I really didn't like to because she was very mean. One of the things we would do that I had done with several friends growing up was sleep outside, in the backyard, without a tent, just in sleeping bags. It was definitely a different era then. No fences. Anyone could have seen us from the road. But there wasn't the thought that something bad could happen. It was summer, and we planned to sleep outside, like we had many times before. But tonight, I just had an awful feeling that something wasn't right. An unsettling feeling, nothing I could put my finger on. We talked and laughed, and then it got really late, so Heather started falling asleep. Her home was a duplex, one story, with a carport on each side. You could see through the carport into the backyard easily. Residential area, in town, so the mountains that surrounded our valley was several miles away. The backyard had bushes against the fence, that then led to the backyards of the next street up, and then a busy road beyond that street. Like I said, we had stepped outside in our backyard many times before, without anything ever happening. This night I had a strange feeling, the one you would get when you're being watched, and I stayed laying in my sleeping bed as Heather slept beside me, but kept my eyes open, looking all around us as covertly as possible, trying to figure out why I felt so scared. I realized there wasn't any noise, no cars driving on the busy road 2 streets over, no birds, the crickets had stopped, just pure silence. I get goosebumps now thinking about it. I cannot explain the sickening feeling that suddenly came over me, as if it was anxiety or something else. But then my ears started ringing, and it was this high frequency noise mixed with TV static. It was painful, and as I was thinking about going inside to get my mom and figure out why my ears were ringing and painful, Heather sat straight up, eyes open, breathing heavily. She moved so robotically, but fast. Her head turned all the way to her right, to where I was lying, staring at me with her eyes wide, and I realized the ringing had stopped. Still, no other sounds. She was looking my way, but not focused on me, like she was looking right through me. And then she started talking. I thought she was mumbling, maybe even sleeping. And then it hit me that she was speaking some other language. My mom is white, but my dad is Mexican, so I've grown up bilingual. And I knew she was speaking another language, and not gibberish. But it was nothing I could put my finger on. She continued to get louder, and I swear everything got darker. The moon had been out, no clouds, so you could see fairly well. And then it was pitch black. As she continued speaking this strange language, it was silent, but something was moving out of the corner of her eye. I slowly turned my head away from Heather and saw a black shadow. No features, still no noise, and it emerged from the ground in the yard next to us by the neighboring duplex. I knew it couldn't be anyone from there because it was a young girl and her toddler, and then an old couple in that duplex. And I couldn't explain what I was seeing. It gradually got larger and was shaped like a cloaked figure, moving very slowly towards us. I was frozen. My fight or flight didn't kick in. All of a sudden, as I'm watching this figure slowly creep up over the grass, coming towards us, it moves fast, fast, like a rush of black smoke, right into Heather. She immediately started screaming the unknown words and shaking. I shot up so fast and ran inside and woke up my mom screaming that something was wrong. Heather's mom heard me, and both moms ran outside. I stood at the back door watching in fear. Heather was laying in her sleeping bed, sleeping soundly. I could hear cars going by, birds, crickets, all the normal nighttime sounds. They looked back at me like I was crazy and woke Heather up, asking if she was okay. She said yes, totally normal. And they asked if I wanted to go back and sleep out there. I refused and slept in the living room. Heather wouldn't come inside. The next morning, we were supposed to go to church with her grandma. Her grandma picked us girls up and sat in the back seat, while she sat in the front. She hadn't talked to me as we were getting ready and completely avoided me, which was weird because she was the kind of kid who needed to be around people, constantly talking and asserting herself. As her grandma was saying what time we would be back to our mom's, I leaned up and asked Heather if she remembered anything from last night. She said no, and I began explaining. The driver's side door was open and I didn't see her grandma coming up. She heard me asking Heather if she remembered anything and how she knew another language, when I'd known her my whole life, and I've never heard her speak it. Her grandma asked me what had happened, and immediately asked me what the language sounded like. So I went through what had happened without telling her about the shadows or strange, painful ringing in my ears. Her grandma was super serious and took it all in. She didn't say anything else or ask any more questions, and we rode in silence to church for the most part. Other than Heather telling me I sounded crazy, we usually sat in the middle with my grandma's friends, but that day she made us sit in the first row. She held her father's hand the entire time, praying and crying. It was very out the norm, and Heather was annoyed and embarrassed and kept trying to bring her hand away. When church finished, we walked back to the car and got it. Your grandma didn't start the car to leave and instead turned to Heather. I can't remember word for word what she said, but I remember her telling her that she must go to church every Sunday, and that she was going to have to stay with her, for the rest of summer break. And she said that she would protect her. I think Heather was very happy to get away because her mom was pretty abusive. But I knew her grandma wasn't talking about her mom. She said she had met something when she was very young, and it spoke a language that she had never heard before, but she knew what it was saying. It offered her a way out of where she was, that she needed to agree and would be saved, but that she knew it wasn't God, but it was something very dark, and that she would rather suffer and die than say yes. I saw Heather less and less, and then my grandparents took me and my brother in, and we lived in the same town, but hung around different groups of people. So I would see her at school sometimes, but that was it. Our moms remained in contact, and last year, my mom mentioned that Heather's grandma had passed away. I said, oh, that's too bad. I barely remember her, and my mom mentioned that she had a very hard life, and that she had been in concentration camp when she was young. I knew she was from Norway, but I'd never heard this. I put two and two together, and I believe whatever came for Heather that night was similar or the same thing to what came for her grandma while in the concentration camp. And that night, those odd words burned into my mind. I've never heard anything remotely close to that strange language since. For the past 2.5 years now, I have been living in the north of the Scottish Highlands. And when I say north, I mean as far north as you can possibly go. I live in a small coastal town, which is actually the northmost town on the British mainland. I had always wanted to live in the Scottish Highlands, which seemed as a far cry from my gloomy hometown back in England. And when my dad and his partner told me they bought an old house up there, I jumped at the opportunity. From what they told me, this place sounded like the perfect destination. There were seals and otters in the town's river, dolphins and orcas in the sea, and at certain times of the year, you could see the northern lights in the night sky. But despite my initial excitement of finally getting to live in the Scottish Highlands, full of beautiful mountains, amazing wildlife, and vibrant culture, I would soon learn the region I had just moved to was far from the ideal destination I had dreamed of. In my spare time, I took to exploring the coastline around the town's area. On one of these days, I started to explore what was east of the town. On the right-hand side of the mouth of the river, there's an old ruin of a castle, but past that leads to a cliff trail around the eastern coastline. 6 or so months later, and into the Christmas season, I'd just gotten out of a long-distance relationship. Feeling as though I'd finally found closure, I decided I wanted to go on a long hike by myself along the cliff trail. And so, the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, I got my backpack together, packed a lunch for myself, and headed out at 6 a.m. The hike along the trail had taken me all day, and by the evening, I had walked so far that I actually discovered what I first thought was a ghost town. What I found was an abandoned port settlement, which had the creepiest looking dispersed of old stone houses, as well as what looked like the ruins of an ancient round tower. As it turned out, this was actually a heritage center, a tourist spot. It seemed I had walked so far around the rugged terrain that I was now 10 miles outside of my town. On the other side of the settlement were very high distant cliffs that I already had trekked along were far grander. Although I could feel my legs finally begin to give way, and already anticipating a long journey back along the trail, I decided I was going to cross the bay and reach the cliffs, and then make my way back home. By the time I was making my way around the bay, it had become very dark. I had already walked past more than a half of the bay, but the cliffs didn't feel any closer. It was at this point when I decided I really needed to turn around, as at night, walking back along the cliff trail was going to be dangerous, and for parts of the trail that led down to the base of the cliffs, I really couldn't afford for that tide to cut off my route. I made my way back through the abandoned settlement of the Heritage Center, and at night, this place definitely felt more like a ghost town. Shining my phone flashlight in the windows of the old stone houses, I was expecting to see a face or something peer out at me. What surprisingly made these houses scarier at night were a handful of old fishing boats that had been left outside them. The wood they were made from looked very old and the paint had mostly weathered off. But what was more concerning was that in this abandoned ghost town of a settlement, I was alone. A van had pulled up with 3 or 4 young men getting out. I wasn't sure what they were doing exactly, but they were burning things into a trash can. What is it that they were burning? I didn't know. But as I made my way out of the abandoned settlement, every time I looked back at the men in the van, at least one of them was watching me. Already feeling scared of the creepy surroundings, I now felt very unsafe because of these men staring suspiciously at me. I was paranoid that they were going to try and follow me, as if I had caught them doing something illegal. Thankfully, they stayed where they were. As I continued to make my way out of the ghost town and back along the trail, the abandoned settlement, the creepy men burning things by their van, that wasn't even the creepiest thing I came across on the hike. The creepiest thing I found actually came as soon as I decided to head back home, before I was even back at the Heritage Center, but that's a whole different story.